It's time for the Garden Guide with your host, Mark Anderson from Anderson Seed and Garden.
New research suggests that people are more likely to eat vegetables if they have a tempting name.
What would life be without homegrown tomatoes? Only two things that money can't buy, and that's true love and homegrown tomatoes.
From gardening to landscaping.
Today we are going to try and create garden eyebrows. Kind of like the flowers are sprouting directly from your hair. That makes sense.
Go! Phone lines are open at 753-KVNU or 800-369-KVNU.
Kind of like eating vegetables.
It's the Garden Guide, now on KVNU 610 AM and 102 FM.
And we welcome you to the Garden Guide on this Saturday morning. We'll feel right along with Mark Anderson from Anderson Seed and Garden, who is joining us in the studio as we're going to be talking about all things garden, particularly with everything that you have going on in the garden. As we just finished setting this up here so that he can be able to hear and that I can be able to hear. So, welcome, Mark. It's been quite a week and a very different week in that we've finally gotten some rain.
Absolutely. You know, you can't beat that moisture coming from the heavens. And it seems like I went out there a couple days after that first rainstorm, and the moisture was still out there in the soil, and plants just jumped like crazy. I swear my corn, I had thrown another dose of fertilizer, so I put another dose of nitrogen on right before it rained, kind of watered it, but then the rain really soaked it in, and I think my corn's grown 12 inches since then. So,
wow.
Yeah, it's just going crazy. So love having that rain in the forecast and cooler temperatures as well too. You know, if we were having 80-degree temperatures instead of mid to high 90s, it's great for the garden. It's great. We don't have to water as much. It's nicer for us. It's a lot more comfortable to be
much
outside.
Better. You know, I noticed our pumpkin plants, and we've never really done very well with pumpkins.
Yeah.
And so we always overplant.
Yeah.
And this year, they all decided to come up.
Yeah.
And then with the rain, they've just taken off. We've got probably 30 to 40 blossoms, and I'm looking at it thinking, I don't want that many pumpkins. So
well,
we're going to have to trim some down.
What's interesting is on the plants, you've got male flowers and you've got female flowers. And the male flowers produce lots of pollen, and of course the bees pick that up and move it to the female flowers and pollinate those, and then all of a sudden fruit set. So there are a lot of male blossoms that are opening up that you'll never have fruit grow on.
Come on.
Yeah, and so you got to watch for the female flowers. So that's one thing we're seeing with squashes and summer squashes and even tomatoes. There's temperature-wise, it was really cold and wet to get things going, and it was like probably mid-June before it finally warmed up, but we were still having cold nighttime temperatures until after the 4th of July, and then it got really hot. And so the plants have had a hard time setting fruit. So we're seeing plants that are struggling to set fruit. We're seeing plants that are producing lots of blossoms, but there's hardly any fruit on there. And so there's some things you can do to get the plants to set fruit as well, too. So the moisture is not going to hurt. The cooler temperatures are not going to hurt. I've got peppers that are ripening already. I've got tomatoes that are ripening already. I mean, it's all right. But we're a little bit behind schedule.
Yeah,
just
very much
because
so.
of that. So.
Well, we can talk about just a lot of things from the garden. We can also talk about what's going to happen because of all the rain with the weeds.
Yeah,
plus also grasshoppers seem to just continue to be out of control.
Still going. Yeah.
And getting bigger and worse.
Yeah, still going. So,
but first off, let's talk about what's going on over at Anderson Seed and Garden.
Yeah. So this week we've got our cash sale started, and if you're not familiar with our cash sale, we've started to put discounts on our remaining trees and shrubs and vines and evergreens and fruit trees, and so they're on sale for 15% off. But if you pay with cash, you get an extra 10% on top of that, so you get 25% off. So this is the start of our cash clearance sale, and of course, all of our trees and shrubs and evergreens and fruit trees that would normally qualify for our 5-year guarantee, they still qualify for picking up our extended warranty, our extended guarantee on those plants for 5 years, which you really can't beat. But get those discount prices, and we've got a great selection of shrubs and trees in. We just got another shipment this Monday of some more shrubs, and so we're really well stocked. Some great looking plants. We've got them all under the shade cloth, and so they look really, really good. But discount for if you pay with a credit card or with a check or with a debit card, you'll get 15% off. But if you bring cash in, the old-fashioned, papery green kind with presidents on them, you get an extra 10% off. So you'll get 25% off. And this is a great time to start picking up some of those trees or shrubs that you were looking at going, I don't know if I want to spend that much. But now we're starting to discount them. We want to clean those out. We want to get them into people's yards so that they're established and ready to go before winter sets in. So we have started our cash clearance sale, and that's going on at Anderson's right now until basically everything's gone. And we'll start at this and see how it goes, and we might bump those numbers up a little bit more towards the end of this month. So
all right,
compost
so
teas, compost tea is still going. We've got probably another week and a half, 2 weeks worth of compost tea. So plan on we're probably going to run out around right when school starts. As soon as school starts, I think right around the 15th through the 20th is kind of where it's looking with the compost tea. So we have a lot of people coming in and still getting refills, and it's been super productive this year. Everybody who's coming in is just like, my plants are growing like crazy. It's like amazing. Yeah, so the compost tea has been really, really productive for a lot of people. Wednesday market. Still going. We won't have classes this coming Wednesday since I will not be available to teach class, but Wednesday market's going on, so it's a great time to come down and see what's going on Center Street, and of course the cash sale's going as well too. So
a lot going on.
Yeah, a lot of fun things. Yeah, and we do have
final few weeks of summer. Really,
yeah.
I know some people say summer just keeps going into September, but kids are going to be going back to school in 2 weeks.
2 weeks, yeah, it's
crazy.
It is crazy. I was like looking at the calendar, going, man, school starts up here pretty soon. So we're at that point where we don't have any more in school. So
congratulations. No back to school nights at the Anderson.
They've moved
family.
on to college and higher education opportunities, and so no more high school, no more back to school nights. So.
Which just means that you don't have to do homework because your kids know it won't do any good to ask your help for homework.
Exactly. Now. So we've gotten past that point. So that's all right. But we're still aware of when school starts for everyone else.
Yeah.
So, but exciting to see the rains come and the cooler temperatures, but it is causing some issues for plants. So one thing we definitely want to be aware of is powdery mildew. So we're getting this monsoonal moisture coming up from the south, which is great. We'll take, half an inch of rain on, what was it, Monday? We got Monday, we got a half an inch of rain. We'll take those every time we can get it. That's a whole month's worth of rain in one storm.
Considering we had 0.04 of an inch of rain in July.
Yeah.
So,
that's a month's worth.
Yeah. Quadrupled. It's amazing.
So we'll take more. But that moisture causes a little bit of humidity, and we have hot days and we have cool nights, and it's perfect conditions for powdery mildew to start up. So we've got pumpkins and summer squashes and winter squashes and cucumbers and zucchinis, and they're all susceptible to powdery mildew. Yeah, and so this is a time to start watching for that showing up. And it looks like somebody has sprayed flour on your plants, like ground up flour.
Just dusted them.
Yeah, just dusted them with this kind of white powdery looking stuff, and it does enough damage to the plants, it'll kill them. It'll like really decrease their productivity, and it will kill the plants within a couple weeks. And so this is something you want to be aware of if you've got vines in your garden, and it will affect a lot of flowers as well too. So it really gets on roses, it gets into nine barks, it gets into columbines. I mean, there's a lot of perennial flowers that are really affected by the mildew. So this is a time to keep your eyes open, kind of watch for that mildew, and it's almost assured that it's going to show up on those squashes, melons, cucumbers. And so just start spraying something preventatively right now to get it going. So I like the Complete Disease Control from Monterey. That's awesome. It does a really great job. Safe to use right up to the minute you're going to harvest. Your copper soap is really good. If you want a systemic, probably the F-Stop from Fertilome is great. You can do an application in the last 2 or 3 weeks, so you can get like really good control out of it that way. So there are some excellent options out there to prevent the diseases from showing up before they really get going. And powdery mildew is one, and then we're starting to see a lot of disease in the tomatoes. I've got a bunch of people bringing samples in like almost on a daily basis, whether it's early or late blight or verticillium or even curly top. We're starting to see a lot of different diseases in tomatoes. How are your tomatoes doing?
The tomatoes, they actually struggled for, especially as we were in the really hot temperatures, months of July, the weeks of July. And then we just we kind of changed our watering a little bit of them, kind of flooded them a little bit more.
Sure.
And they started to take off. And I was out checking on them last night, and they've really just started to blossom out.
Yeah.
So for a couple weeks in July, they were definitely struggling. When those hot temperatures came in, we just couldn't do anything. Those plants were like, "Hey, I'm going into survival mode." And then once those temperatures started to cool back down and we started getting some more moisture, it's really helped.
Yeah, our plants are looking really good. They're big. They're starting to really set fruit. I've got some tomatoes that are ripening up, but we did have to get rid of one plant. This is the first time in probably 5 years I've had a plant that really got hit with verticillium, and so we got rid of that one plant. I've been treating them with the complete disease control each year when I'm planting, and it has taken care of late blight, it's taken care of early blight, verticillium, fusarium, but I think this plant was infected before, because it just really never ever took off. It just kind of sat there and was stunted compared to the rest of the plants. I mean, the rest of the plants are like 5-6 feet tall, and that one was still about 2 feet tall, and it was in a 1 gallon container when we planted it, so I think it already had it before it even got started. So I ended up getting rid of that one. But man, the rest of the plants are looking really good, and saw some Cherokee purples that were ripening up last night on my tomato plants.
Nice.
so it's starting to happen. Yeah. I've got a couple that are kind of slow getting going. Our Brandy Masters are really, they're just starting to set fruit, where I've got other plants that are pretty well loaded right now. But if you want to try and control diseases, when we get that monsoonal moisture, not only do we see the powdery mildew showing up on the squashes, melons, cucumbers, but we start to see bacterial speck and a lot of leaf spots and various diseases that show up on the tomato plants as well too. And so the complete disease control, it really doesn't get any better than that for an organic, very safe, very effective option to try and control some of these diseases before they get started. So this, again, is a great time to kind of watch for that happening. Curly top looks like your plants, the leaves will kind of curl and twist. And when they curl and twist, they don't just curl up. They curl up and then the leaves twist as well, too. But then on the undersides of the leaves, the veins all turn purple. Oh, and so it has a very distinctive look to it. So curly top, once the plants get that, you really can't control it either. So you got to prevent. And it's the insects that will pick it up from an infected plant and spread it to other plants. And so make sure you control your insect population. Make sure you do a little preventative application of some fungicides to stop that bacterial speck and the leaf spots, and the black spots will show up on your tomato fruit, and it makes the tomatoes taste different. They don't taste good. And so those you just have to prevent those diseases, because once they get into the plants, they kind of have spread and affected all the fruit. And so as the fruit is really starting to mature and come on and ripen, we want to prevent all those diseases. So the complete disease control is just a great way to start with that. And you don't have to spray like once every week to 10 days, through the next month, just to kind of stay on top of that. Yeah, so maybe 3 applications in the next month, and by the time we get into September, you'll be harvesting fruit like crazy. You won't have the problems.
So we're talking about just a number of gardening and watering, lawn care items that have come up over the last couple of weeks for today's show. And I'm sure one of the questions that you have just been hit with over and over and over is, how do I keep my lawn green?
Yes. We're seeing lots of samples of lawn. We have started to see some insect damage. So early on this summer, we saw a lot of disease. Then it got really hot. We saw a lot of stress, and now we're starting to see some insect damage as well too. So it's tough when there's all those problems out there to try and stay on top of it. And the damage, unfortunately, on a photo all kind of looks the same too. But I had a gentleman in the other day, and he had 2 sections of his lawn, one that was looking amazing and one that was just like really struggling, and it was split in the middle with his driveway. So it was right along the driveway, and the one side is where the house is, and the other side is kind of like on the edge of his property. And so as I looked at his photos and I started asking questions, it's like, okay, on the side where the lawn doesn't look very good, I can see green sections right around where your sprinklers are at. So that kind of indicates to me that it's a watering issue. And he's like, oh no, it gets this, water's going, sprinklers are doing great over there. And so as we talked about it, found out that along his driveway is where his sprinkler heads are on both sides of the driveway. But on we'll call it the right side, he had sprinklers close to the house that were spraying out as well. So they were getting double coverage. But on the other side, where his house isn't, the sprinklers were just down the driveway side, and there weren't sprinklers on the opposite side.
Side.
So I'm like, okay, even though they're going for the same amount of time, guess what? The lawn on this side is getting half. It's getting half the water
that the other side's
getting. And he's like, oh, no, it can't be water. And I was like, okay, bring me a sample and let's take a look at it. So he brought a sample back like a half an hour later, and we looked at it. He's like, look, it's wet right here. And I was like, yeah, but it rained last night. This is right after we got
the storm.
Like, it rained last night. So let's look at it's like, the first inch or two is wet, but guess what? It's bone dry down below. He brought a deep sample, and I was like, if you go home and you cut into your lawn where it looks good and you check down this deep, I'll bet it's going to be wet down here. And so finally I was able to convince him that other side is getting half the amount of water, and that's why it's stressing and it doesn't look as good. So really, when it comes to diagnosing, you've got to get out there and you got to dig some samples up. And I start with the best looking spot in the lawn first. So I go to the best looking place, cut a 8x8, 10x10 inch square out of it, dig it up. I mean, you'll be able to see how well attached the root system is. You'll be able to see, how it doesn't want to tear out really easy. You'll be able to see how deep the moisture's penetrated. And at that point you go, okay, we watered not last night, but the night before, and moisture's down this far. So then you have something to compare it to when you go to the bad spots. So it's like, okay, good spot is this wet. It's really hard to pull the roots out. It's well developed. I mean, you can really see what a good sample is supposed to look like. Then you go to the spot that's having trouble, and then you do the same thing. 8x8 inch square, dig it up, and if you grab it and it just rips out really easy, then you've probably had some insect damage, and they've already damaged the root system. But if you dig into it and you pull it back and it doesn't want to come out and it feels really well attached, like the first sample that you checked, and it just doesn't want to come out, but you look down in there and you go, okay, it's really dry compared to the first sample that I looked at. That first sample, the soil is moist all the way through, and this, it's down an inch. It's like dry and dry down below. Then you've got a watering issue. Yeah. But if you do the same thing and you can't pull it out, it doesn't come out really easily, and the soil's moist all the way through, and it hasn't rained the night before, then we know it's probably a disease, because the disease won't affect the root system. It's going to just make the blades look bad up on the surface. So the root system's going to stay well attached. It's not going to want to come out. The soil's moist all the way through. At that point, we've eliminated the possibility of insects. We've eliminated the possibility of it being just a stress issue, and what's left is disease. And so then we treat for disease and try and get the grass to come back. So,
and one of the things we saw this year, and I think you had mentioned this maybe last year or the year before, is don't always rely on your sprinkler system.
Yes.
Because those sprinklers will break.
Yeah.
We found we had one corner of our yard this year, and all of a sudden I was looking at it and I thought, man, we have this really beautiful green strip that just kind of arced right from where the rainbird, we have those little pop-up rainbirds, and there was just this perfect arc. And I thought, well, that's weird. And our sprinklers always go on late at night.
So you don't,
when the sun's
don't
down.
always look at them.
Yeah. And so I turned it on during the day about a month ago, and sure enough, that one rainbird pops up and just would continue in that arc. It'd never go back and forth.
Yeah, it didn't move.
And so replaced it, and now it's working fine. But I noticed that USU Extension, and they do this every year, where they'll come out and for free do an assessment on your watering. And if you're a novice and not really sure, that's a great resource that we have locally.
Usually we'll recommend to people at least once a month you should check your sprinklers and just make sure everything's working, because either they come on late at night or they come on really early in the morning. You don't always see them.
Yeah.
And whether a shrub has grown taller or a sprinkler head got broken, and at my mom's house, the grass, we've left it a little bit longer so that it doesn't dry out as quickly, so the grass stays green longer because we're mowing it a lot taller. But the grass has grown really tall, and it has actually kind of blocked the sprinkler. So when it pops up, the grass has gotten tall enough it's kind of bound up in there, and all of a sudden the sprinkler's only covering that one section, like you said, and then it's like dry around it.
Spot.
Yeah, so you got to watch those sprinklers and make sure that they're functioning properly and they're spraying correctly and they're matching up in the right spot. Otherwise, you're going to have spaces that just don't stay green.
Yeah.
You know, and everyone's been great here in the valley this year to be a little bit more conscious of how much water they're using. So I've heard from lots and lots of customers and lots of homeowners that, hey, we've cut our water back, and it's surprising how well our lawns looked, and we've used a lot less water to keep it that way. And if you're using a product like Back to Green or the Hydratane, man, it's like adding 30% of water to your applications. It just really makes that much of a difference. So there's some really great options out there to help keep your lawn green, keep it looking good. Lawn helps cool things down. It filters a lot of dust. And when we get a big rainstorm like we got the other night, we didn't have a lot of runoff because the grass just trapped it and the soil absorbed it. Yeah. So it serves a very useful function, but we don't have to water it as much as we have been in the past, and it's okay for it to be not quite as green during the hot part of the summer. And as soon as it cools down in August and September and it starts raining again, grass will come back. It'll be gorgeous.
Be right back.
Yep, it'll be beautiful. Be beautiful.
Well, we've still got a few minutes left before we hit the bottom of the hour news break, and we want to mention again the cash sale is going on.
Yeah. So with the cash sale, 15% off all of our remaining trees and shrubs and fruit trees and evergreens and vines. So all of our nursery stock's on sale right now. And if you pay with cash, the old-fashioned green paper presidential stuff, you get an extra 10% off. So you get a 25% discount. And we just got some great-looking shrubs in, beautiful fruit trees in stock right now, a lot of good-looking evergreens, a lot of nice, really shade trees and flowering trees as well, too. So we've got a great selection. Good sale going on. Make sure and bring some cash, and you'll be able to take advantage of our cash sale. And almost all of our plants that are zoned for our area are still eligible for our 5-year guarantee as well, too, when you purchase those plants. So make sure and ask about that.
So the 5-year guarantee is you will basically, assuming that they plant it correctly.
Yes.
And that's the main thing is that you've got to make sure
planted. Yeah. So the details on the guarantee are you buy a couple products. One would be either a root stimulator or the Kangaroots to go with your purchase, and then you have to buy the Mike product, which is a mycorrhiza that you plant with the tree, and it makes the tree or the shrub or whatever it is that you're planting, makes the root system go like crazy. And so you plant with that. And then if you do those and plant according to our instructions, which we'll also give to you and show you how to do that. I actually have a photographic instructional guide on our website that kind of walks you through the whole process, shows you how big the hole is and how to plant everything. So that's actually a really nice resource as well too. But if you plant according to our instructions, we'll guarantee that plant for you for 5 years. It is not guaranteed against lawnmowers. or
weed whackers,
or moose coming in and laying down on your tree. I mean for traditional stuff.
Yeah, understood. One of the biggest things though that I see, and we had a couple of trees that I failed to do it, is you've got to dig the hole large enough. You don't just dig it for the size of the root ball.
Yep.
Otherwise, you're basically just dropping it into a hole, and those roots are going to have a hard time penetrating, especially through some of the clay soil that we have.
We're taking it from one pot and just put it into another pot that's just slightly larger. And then they don't grow. So you always want to dig your hole at least 2 to 3 times the size of the pot, but you don't have to go much deeper. And so just slightly deeper than the pot, but 2 to 3 times wider, and what a difference it makes. I mean, it makes a huge difference because like within the first year or two, the tree or shrub has the ability to grow through that looser, lighter soil. And we'll usually recommend you condition the soil that you take out of the hole when you're digging it with 25 or 30% of a nice compost or a tree transplanting mix. And we're going to lighten that soil up. And then when you plant it, boy, it just has all that room to grow and get that root system to take off before it hits the harder, heavier soil. You'll just be much, much more successful that way. Yeah, much more successful.
We're talking with Mark Anderson here for the Garden Guide on this Saturday morning. Coming up, we're going to talk all things garden because it is time where we are getting into the harvest, the best time of gardening.
Best time of the year, yes. Best
And
time
so
of the year.
we'll talk some harvesting, but we've also got to talk insects because, grasshoppers, they are just invading everywhere. And that's not the only insects that we're dealing with in the garden. So we'll talk insects coming up as well as we hit the bottom of the hour here on the Garden Guide on KVNU. I'm Will Feel Right with your KVNU News Update. It's brought to you by Napa Auto Parts. Well, for the third consecutive year, target shooting is being banned at several northern Utah locations beginning immediately. Now, the ban announced on Friday includes Utah Division of Wildlife Resources wilderness management areas in Richmond, East Fork, Little Bear, Hardware, Cinnamon Creek, and Middle Fork in Cache County. It also applies to Coldwater Creek and Brigham Face in Boxelder County and Woodruff in Rich County. Now, the DWR's latest ban is being issued in an effort to try to decrease the risk of wildfires being started. The firearm target shooting restrictions will be reevaluated every 2 weeks for the duration of the hot summer months. DWR Habitat Section Chief Eric Edgley said that the firearm target shooting can spark and start a wildfire. He noted that in 2020, 2 large wildfires on WMA land burned several hundred acres of wildlife habitat. Now, target shooting and camping was already restricted in the Millville-Providence area after officials had cited years of ongoing issues, including public safety concerns. And a 23-year-old North Logan man has been arrested for allegedly trying to strangle a woman several times, according to law enforcement. Caden Lee Otasua was booked Thursday into the Cache County Jail after police were called to a reported domestic dispute. Otasua was arraigned Friday morning during a virtual hearing in 1st District Court, appearing by web conference from jail. He was charged with aggravated kidnapping, a first-degree felony, obstructing justice, a second-degree felony, aggravated assault, a third-degree felony, and 2 misdemeanors. Judge Spencer Walsh ordered Otasua to remain in jail while attorneys review evidence in the case, and he ordered him to appear again in court on Wednesday. Scattered showers and thunderstorms in the forecast, but those will clear out as we head into Sunday as temperatures will start to warm back up. Will Feel Right, KVNU News.
From ABC Sports, I'm Mark Remillard, and NL East showdown at Citi Field.
That thing's going to leave. A home run by Eddie Rosario. He just sent one soaring over the right field wall. A 3-run home run.
The call on ATL 680, the Braves building an early lead with Eddie Rosario slamming a 3-run homer in the first inning and an RBI double in the second. Atlanta was up 8-zip at one point with the Mets clawing their way back, but Atlanta avoided their first 3-game skid of the year, the final 9-6. Another battle of the first 2 spots in the NL West.
It'll score 2 more. It's a rout. It's 8-0 in the 3rd inning.
The call on AM 570 after honoring famed announcer Vin Scully with an 8-1 routing of the supercharged San Diego Padres. The Dodgers extended their division lead to a season-best 13.5 games over San Diego. This is ABC.
This is Josh with Industrial Tool and Supply. Our Milwaukee tool sale is this Thursday from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. The deals on Milwaukee are as low as ever. Plus, get free goods on select items. Purchase a whole hog or super hog and get a free hacksaw or 7-piece big hog kit. Or snag a select grinder and get a free 6.0 amp-hour battery high output. Hurry, stock is limited though. You'll find what you need at Industrial Tool and Supply in Logan.
Coming up on a Monday edition of the Clay Travis and Buck Sexton Show, Clay is back, Buck too. Got a lot to discuss with you about politics, including how the Republicans are going to rally after a tough week for them on a number of fronts last week. What's it looking like now in the economy? Plus, the wide open border continues to be a source of real consternation across the nation. We'll discuss that coming up on Clay and Buck.
10 to 1 on News Talk KVNU, 102 FM and 610 AM.
We are there in your community. Small business owners, mechanics, police officers, homemakers. And we are there serving our nation in the Air Force Reserve. When medical emergencies arise, in cybersecurity, when natural disasters happen, we are there in space. We are Reserve Citizen Airmen, and we are there with over 180 different jobs to serve your country. Air Force Reserve.
Taking the guesswork out of gardening. It's the Garden Guide with Mark Anderson from Anderson Seed and Garden on News Talk KVNU, 610 AM and 102.1 FM.
Welcome back to the Garden Guide on this Saturday morning. We'll feel right along with Mark Anderson of Anderson Seed and Garden. We were mentioning just as we went into the break, we're going to be talking about all things insects because, oh man, as much as I love this time of year for harvesting the garden, you hate this time of year because it seems like the grasshoppers
bugs,
are harvesting as many things out of the garden as I am.
Oh, it's amazing how quickly they can eat just entire leaves.
Yeah.
You know, I've got people bringing samples in. It's like, I'm not sure what's eating my plants. It's like, have you got grasshoppers? Like, yeah. It's like, well, they'll eat these chunks right out of your plants. You know?
Yeah.
So we love the rain, but it's great to get that moisture, but it is increasing our disease potential, and it's absolutely increasing our weed potential too.
Oh yeah,
I have soaker hoses and drip system in my garden, so only the spots where the plants are get watered, except when it rains. And then when it rains, about a week later, it's like explosion of weeds like everywhere. So also be aware of the weeds.
Yeah. Seems like morning glory and everything.
Yeah. We're going to be
else
weeding
all
like
over.
crazy here about a week or 10 days.
Yeah, from all the rain,
all
that
the
we had.
rainstorms. Yeah. So they'll be coming. So watch for that. But
not only are we having insects in the garden, but a lot of insects inside house.
Oh yeah.
Coming inside.
Yeah.
I have noticed ants seem like are just doing everything they can to get
crazy.
inside the house this time of year.
So have you noticed that it's getting darker at night earlier? So we're not the only ones that notice. The bugs are starting to notice it as well too. So hobo spiders, aggressive house spiders, they are noticing that it's starting to cool down at night and that the daylight hours are starting to get shorter. So they are not super intelligent, but they know what they're looking for. And so they know that the days are starting to get shorter. That means fall's coming and winter's on its way. And so those spiders are looking for mates. They're looking for places to set up shop for fall and winter, and so they're starting to come inside. So usually around the first part of August is when we start to see aggressive house spiders showing up in the house. You start to see box elder bugs showing up. You start to see, a lot more insects. So this is a great time to get some spider traps out. We've got a sale going on our spider traps right now, so you can get a 5-pack for about $10. And you set up the spider traps, and they are attracted to go inside the traps if they're nearby. It won't attract the spiders from outside to come inside to get stuck in the trap. So I've had some people who are like, I don't want to put those traps up because it attracts the spiders. It's going to bring them in the house. It's like, no, it doesn't work that way.
If they are in your house.
If they are in your house, then they'll be attracted to the trap instead of to your bathroom, where you're hanging out or wherever it might be. But you put the traps up, and as soon as you start to catch spiders, then you have traffic in your house. And so then once you notice that you've got traffic, then it's a good time to do an insecticide spray. There's some really safe products you can use indoors, and it'll work on spiders and ants and earwigs and grasshoppers and box elder bugs, elm seed beetles, everybody that wants to come inside, millipedes, and it gives you a multiple months residual as well too. So we use Seismic, and the Seismic does a great job. It's labeled for use indoors. It's labeled for use around food preparation areas and rest homes and hospitals. And it's a really, really safe product, but super, super effective on spiders and ants and other invaders that want to come inside. And so we'll just spray around the windows, around the doors, and the window wells and around the dryer vent and anywhere where you think they might be coming inside. And then I'll go inside. I'll hit like key areas down there, in the pantry, in the furnace room, along some of the baseboards, behind the garbage can, underneath the sink, wherever you think they might be. And then this will set up a kind of a barrier where if they crawl through it, it's gonna kill them before they get active and aggressive. And it's not fun finding a great big spider on the on the wall in the basement.
No, it's usually what produces the loud shrieks
Screams,
around my house.
Screaming.
With the girls around
so that's
the house.
that's starting to happen. Seeing a lot of squash bugs too. So squash bugs are doing damage. It's almost a daily occurrence where I got somebody come in. They're like, last week my plants looked great, and then I went out there this morning and they're just like on the ground. And it's like, okay, is it a squash, a pumpkin, or a zucchini, and they're like, yes, and they'll affect all of those, and so you've got to prevent. So multi-use dust from High Yield's awesome. Permethrin, like indoor-outdoor from High Yield, also excellent. Bug Blaster works great. You can use that on plants where you're not going to eat the fruit. It's great for pumpkins because most of the time you're not eating the pumpkins, so you don't have to worry about the pesticides sticking around a little bit longer. Bug Blaster has a longer residual. It does a really great job on the squash bugs, but I wouldn't be using it like on my zucchinis that I'm picking almost on a daily basis. But very, very effective on those insects, and it'll do a great job. And then, yesterday, I had probably 5 people who sent me messages or stopped me in the store or sent me an email, called me on the phone. My petunias are just, the plants are huge, that there's no flowers on them at all. I'm fertilizing like crazy. I'm using your secret recipe, and it's like they're just not blooming. What should I do? And it's like, okay, if you're using the secret recipe, they should be blooming like crazy because that's what it does. Do you have tobacco budworms? And they're like, well, the leaves are kind of sticky, and I see these little black dots all over them. It's like, okay, yeah, you got budworms. So the budworms are very good at camouflaging themselves. So they hide along the stems of the plant, and most of the time you can't see them, but they love to eat the flowers of petunias and geraniums. And so they will eat the flowers out before the flowers even open. Before they even open. Really? So you'll have these buds there that haven't opened up yet, and if you look at the side of the geranium bud, there's a hole in it, and the worms got in there and is eating the flower bud out, and then it never opens up. Yeah. And so if your petunias have just stopped blooming, but the plants look really green and healthy, it's because you've got tobacco budworms. And the same thing with the geraniums. They will continue producing buds, but none of them will open because the insects are eating them up. And the adult of that caterpillar, the adult, flies around in the evening just as the sun's going down or has just barely gone down, and it's a moth that flies around, and it looks like a hummingbird. So it's a moth that beats its wings really, really fast, and it has a larger, really long snout. It's a bigger moth, and it is the adult of the tobacco budworm. Yeah. And they will lay their eggs on those plants. The eggs hatch out. The larvae just eat like crazy. That's all they do is just poop and eat. The little black dots all over the plants are the poops. Makes the plants really sticky. And so then you get like the wind blows and the debris sticks to the plant, so it looks like it's like really dirty as well too. So there's some things you can look for that indicate that you've probably got tobacco budworms. We treat all the hanging baskets and the flowers down on Center Street and on Main Street every 2 weeks, starting about mid-June, just to prevent them before they get started. Because if we don't, all of a sudden everything just stops blooming. Yeah, it just stops blooming. Plant never dies. It just has no blossoms on it. Yeah, so the tobacco budworms can do a lot of damage. They can make your plants look really scroungy and unhappy because there's just no flowers on them. Even if you're fertilizing, they'll just stop blooming.
So look for the small little brown specks.
Yep.
Stickiness of this.
Stickiness, and your flowers just like disappear. On the petunias, you'll see holes in the flowers themselves, and that's kind of an indicator. But then they'll start just eating all the flower buds. And if you want to stick with something organic, either spinosad or spinosad soap does a great job and totally safe to use. You can mix it up in a watering can, just water your plants with it, get all over the leaves, and it will do a good job. If you want to stick with an organic option, that's the way I would go. If you want something a little stronger, then again, Bug Blaster, the indoor-outdoor would be great. We use a product from Fertilome that's called 2-in-1. It has a systemic insecticide as well as a systemic fungicide in there, so it'll take care of diseases as well as the insects. And it does a really great job. That's one I definitely mix up in the water when I'm watering them. You can put it in with your fertilizer and just water the plants with it. They'll pick it up through the root system as well as in through the leaves. So you want to use it on the leaves as a contact, but then also water the plant with it, and it'll give you 2 or 3 weeks of residual. So that's what we use on the hanging baskets and the planters on Center Streets. We use that systemic, and so the insecticide stays inside the plant for quite a long time. You'll get 2 or 3 weeks of control out of it, and we do it in the evening or really early in the morning before the bees get out, so it doesn't affect the bees. Doesn't affect your bees.
So, what can we do with grasshoppers though? Because that's the real trick because of. Well, I guess supply chain issues.
Right.
It's really hit us hard.
No low bait. We've been recommending a lot of 7. Seven has done a really great job on the grasshoppers and is safe to use on your edibles as well as your ornamental plants. The Bug Blaster from High Yield, definitely my go-to for grasshoppers around the yard. It's good for mosquitoes. It's good for moths, for all kinds of different insects. But it really does a great job on the grasshoppers, even when they're bigger. So it really knocks them down well. And permethrin, the indoor-outdoor from High Yield, would be an excellent option as well too. And then I've been using a repellent in my garden, and I'm due for another application of the repellent. I should probably do that here in the next little bit. And it just drives the insects away. They just go somewhere else. They don't like the way it smells. They don't like how they feel when they're in there, and they just leave and go somewhere else. Makes them really uncomfortable. And so the cedar oil granules or the liquid smells great. It's made specifically for mosquitoes to make mosquitoes go away, but it really helps with the adult insects that fly. So flying insects, it's really good on those, and it makes them just leave, go to your neighbor's house, and it also will not bother your beneficial insects. So it won't bother ladybugs, praying mantis, lacewings. It just won't affect those, and so it's not going to bother your beneficial insects.
We're talking with Mark Anderson here during the Garden Guide on this Saturday morning, and we've been talking about insects and some of the problems that we're seeing with gardening. Earlier, we were talking about taking care of your lawn, because a lot of people wondering how to try to do what they can while still conserving water.
Exactly.
What's some of the other questions that you've gotten this past week?
Great question. We are starting to see onions are starting to die down a little bit, so it's a great time to start thinking about harvesting your onions. Usually by mid to late August, we'll see the onion plants, the tops just kind of die down, which means they're pretty much done growing. And at that point, it's time to harvest the onions and prep them, start getting them ready for storage for the winter time. So usually by mid to late August, onion tops have started dying down. If they're not doing that, you can actually just lightly step on the top of the onions. Yeah, just to kind of break the tops a little bit, tip them over, and leave them that way for probably 3 or 4 days, maybe up to a week or so. And then dig the onions up and turn them upside down so that the root is exposed. So I'll pull the onions up, I'll turn them upside down, make sure the root system is kind of exposed to the sun, and then I'll leave them out there for a day or two. If it looks like it's going to rain, don't just leave them for a little bit longer if it looks like it's going to rain, because you want the root end to really dry. And so I'll leave them out in the sun for a day or two, let the root end dry, and then I'll gather those all up, put them in a warm, dry location like in the shed or in the barn, and we're just going to leave them there with the tops on them for about 4 to 6 weeks. And we're going to let the warm temperatures and the dry conditions help the onions develop that hard outer wrapper skin. And when they develop that hard outer skin, then they're ready to store. And so by the end of September, middle part of October, you can trim the tops off, put them in an onion sack, and they go down the basement where it's cool and dry, and then they'll keep for months.
And then you won't run the risk of getting mildew and mold
exactly.
Everything else.
You got to let them dry for that 4 to 6 weeks, so they'll develop that nice hard outer wrapper skin. And then if you do that, then your onions they'll just store a lot better for you. But we're kind of that season where it's time to start thinking about harvesting the onions. It's also definitely time to harvest garlic. So if you've been growing garlic, now's the time to harvest your garlic, get that dried. We do it pretty much the same way as with the onions, and then plant your garlic in September, October. That's like the best time to plant for the next year. So
about a month from now.
We'll be getting garlic in end of this month, first part of September. Last year I had 24 varieties of garlic, and they sold about as fast as we could bring them in.
Really?
Yeah, so everybody
24
varieties. Yeah, so we had probably 6 or 8 varieties of soft necks and probably about 14, 16 varieties of hard neck. And each of them, they all taste like garlic. I mean,
I was going to say,
when it comes down to it,
garlic.
They all kind of taste like garlic, but they have different qualities. Some will store a little bit longer. Some are a little spicier. Some are a little hotter. Some have a more robust flavor. I mean, there's enough variation between them that you can tell the difference. But for the most part, they all taste like garlic.
It's garlic.
But it is fun to grow some different things. So some of my favorites would be like Susan Delafield. We grew some Persian Star last year, Purple Glazer, Boy, those were really, really good. That's some great flavor. So some nice varieties of garlic to do.
Okay.
And so, plan on harvesting garlic right now. A lot of people are starting to dig up and transplant iris and peonies. So end of July, first part of August is a good time to think about digging those up. Daylilies right after they're done blooming. So again, usually the first part of August, a lot of those bulbs, we can dig them up, we can trim them, we can divide them, and we can get them replanted so that they'll bloom again next year.
Okay.
So really good time to do that. So if you haven't separated your iris or your daylilies for 3 or 4 years, you're probably due. You're due for that, and this is a really, really good month to do that. So with the iris, with the daylilies, you want to just dig them up, and as long as you've got a fan of leaves coming on each piece, where the tubers are all kind of intertwined and attached, you can cut them apart so that there's leaves on each clump. Okay. So you cut them so that there's leaves on each piece, and then we tell people with the iris, it's like, give some to your neighbor, give some to your friend, give some to the people down the street that you don't like, because you've got like so many, you can't get rid of them all. Yeah. And then plant back, 3 leaflet leaves, or three tubers that have a fan of leaves on them, instead of a giant clump, and then they will do much, much better. You can condition the soil, add a little bit of fertilizer, fix the soil up a little bit. They don't need to be fertilized a lot, so you don't want to fertilize too heavily, but plant 3 tubers back where you took those big clumps out, and in 3 years they'll be like right back.
And they take off.
Yeah, they'll just be right back where they were before. You can do pretty much the daylilies the same way. With the peonies, it's a little bit trickier. You got to be a little bit more careful where you're dividing, and you got to make sure you plant them at the right depth, and they don't multiply as much as the other plants. But this is the time of year to do all 3 of those. Yeah.
Talking with Mark Anderson from Anderson Seed and Garden here on the Garden Guide. One of the questions that I actually got this week, someone was talking to me about raspberries.
Yeah.
And they said, my raspberries never get really much taller than knee height.
Yeah.
And my neighbor, they've got them 5 to 6 feet tall.
Right. Raspberries are very sensitive to your soil type, and so if you've got them in a good spot, well drained, soil that holds moisture but drains out really well, they will perform a lot better than if they're in a heavier clay soil. So we planted some raspberries this spring. Unfortunately, it's in a more of a clay spot. I conditioned the soil. I added some zeolite, added some compost, worked that in, but it's still a lot harder compacted than some other areas of my garden. So they really like to have the right soil conditions, and they like to be fertilized a lot. So they like a lot of nitrogen. So your friend probably is lacking nitrogen, and their soil might be a little bit heavy, and so then your raspberries will be shorter, they'll be smaller. And so I've got a soaker hose that goes down through our raspberries. I consistently throw a little bit of just straight nitrogen out there to encourage just some growth. Usually I'll do it every time I prune. So if I prune in the springtime, I'll fertilize right after that, do some nitrogen and iron, and then when I pick in the summer and pick all the fruit, then we'll prune them again, and then we fertilize at that point. And then in the fall, if we prune another fall crop or pick another fall crop, I'll prune out the old canes and trim some of those down and fertilize again. So usually 2 or 3 times a year, we'll fertilize with nitrogen and do a chelated iron on them to keep them green. And if you do that, then your canes will grow tall. You'll get lots of production off of them, and they are fairly heavy feeders. So you really want to feed the raspberries every year. Yeah.
And heavy on the fertilizer.
Yep, heavy on the fertilizer, and you got to thin those out every now and then as well too, because they'll get really overcrowded, and you get a whole bunch of canes all over the place. So they crowd each other out, and then you got to feed them more.
Yeah. Well, jumping back to the garden, because you mentioned your corn that you had given your second application, was it?
Yes.
Second application of nitrogen.
Yep. So we do 3 applications of nitrogen during the growing season, when it's usually 8 to 12 inches tall, when it's 2 to 3 feet tall, and then again when it tassels. And so we just did our second application on Monday night, right before it rained. It was like perfect. And so I put about a teaspoon to a tablespoon of nitrogen around each cluster of corn, just walked up and down the rows and just tossed it by hand. and then I furrowed it, pushed a little bit of dirt on top of it, and then I turned my soaker hoses on and got it, well watered, but you could tell the nitrogen hadn't completely broken down where it wasn't all covered up. But then we got that rainstorm on top of it.
Okay.
Perfection. Yeah, it couldn't be any better, because I noticed the next day that all the nitrogen had dissolved and gone down into the soil, and so then the corn's going to pick that up and utilize it. And I have seen my corn just jump a foot in height since I threw that nitrogen on. And so it's starting to tassel right now. So I'll probably do it again here in another week.
And at the same time, do you also want to hit it with another insecticide, especially as you're getting close to tasseling?
It's usually when it's like when your ears are really forming, you want to treat the silks. Mm-hmm. So since it's starting to really show tassels, probably again in about a week, the silks will be formed and the pollen will be dropping out of the corn. And so that's a great time to start treating for corn earworm as well too. Spinosad soap's the best. I mean, it doesn't get any better. It kills the larvae as they hatch out, and that's your number one culprit that's going to damage your corn. So you've got a great organic option that's safe to use. Won't bother the bees that are probably all over the pollen that's coming out of the corn, and does a really, really great job on those insects. All you have to do is just spray a light spray on the not on the tassels, on the silks, on the silks on the cobs, and you'll prevent your corn earworms from having a little snack.
And yet it won't hurt the bees.
Won't hurt the bees at all. Yeah. And it's going to target that specific insect and do a really good job. So a little bit of nitrogen at 8 to 12 inches. 2 to 3 feet, and at tassel time. Okay. And that's when you really want to feed that corn. Otherwise, you're going to have smaller ears. They're not going to fill out all the way. You only have 1 ear per stalk. And if you feed them enough, you'll get 2 or 3 ears per stalk. They'll be big. They'll fill out all the way. Your corn will be taller. It'll just perform a lot better. And it's a heavy, heavy nitrogen feeder, even more so than the raspberries.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, we've almost run out of time. The last few minutes, we want to talk again about what's going on over at Anderson Seed and Garden with the cash sale. It's underway.
So our cash sale is going on right now. So we're starting to clearance out all of our trees and shrubs, evergreens, fruit trees, shade trees, flowering trees, and vines even as well too. So they're on sale for 15% off. But if you bring in cash, the old-fashioned green kind paper money with presidents on it, that's not from the Monopoly game.
Exactly.
Yeah. And we don't take foreign cash.
Or the forfeit.
Yeah, we don't take foreign cash either. But if you bring cash in, then you get an extra 10% off on your plant purchase. And so if you pay with cash, you'll get an extra 10, and so get 25% off. So this is like the start of our cash sale. Cash sale will go until probably end of September, 1st October, when everything's gone. But now's when you have the best selection. Yeah. So if you were looking at a plant a month ago and you're going, I'd love to get that tree, but it's a bit out of my budget, now's a great time because you're going to get 25% off if you pay with cash. And it's a great way to encourage our customers to come in and spend some money, but also get some really good discounts as well too, and save a little bit of money at the same time. So good pricing, sales are going on, cash discount, and really good selection of plants at Anderson's. We do have some bloomed out perennials that are 70% off still. We do have a few annuals that you could plant and get a little bit of color out of that are $1, and we do have some nice herbs that are on sale for $1 as well too, for those 4-inch herbs. So great. If you got some extra space in your garden, take a few herbs home, throw them in there. I've got some rosemary, got some thyme, got a whole bunch of different things. It'd be a great way to add a few plants to your garden to get a little bit more harvest out of them.
You were mentioning, too, that later on in the sale, possibly the discounts will go up.
Yes.
But the selection
but a lot will
is
be
going to
gone.
go down.
Yeah, a lot will be gone. So if there's something that you really want, we've got it in stock right now, don't wait, because it's going to disappear.
Yeah, no guarantees that those plants are going to stay.
Yeah, it's going to disappear. And all of our hardy trees and shrubs, they still qualify for a 5-year guarantee. So there's really not many people around that offer a 5-year guarantee. And all we ask is you buy some root stimulator or Kanga roots and some Mike, which you should be planting the tree with anyway. So you just buy a couple products that'll make you more successful with your plants, and then we will give you a 5-year guarantee on your trees and shrubs if they're hardy for our area. So I had somebody come in yesterday, and they're like, well, What if I live in Bear Lake? Okay, Bear Lake, you got different conditions. There's
Totally
some plants that we'll cover in Bear Lake, and there's others that we won't. If you live in Cub River, you're a little bit colder still. Wellsville. So there are some limitations on depending on where you live, and if you're trying to grow a Zone 5 cherry, it's not going to make it in Bear Lake. It's probably not going to make it in Cub River either, and you might be pushing it over in Wellsville also. So there are some limitations depending on what zone you live in, but for the most part, it's our Zone 5 and below trees and shrubs that we're covering with our plant guarantee, and we don't carry very many 6s, so they just don't do well here. So, but 5 years a great guarantee on those plants, and we just don't have many people that bring stuff back. It's like it happens every now and then, but if you hit it with the lawnmower, hit it with the weed whacker, somebody runs it over with the track hoe, that's not covered under our guarantee.
Yeah. So get in and take advantage of the cash sale that's going on right now at Anderson Seed and Garden, and join us again next week for the Garden Guide here on KVNU. And as always, if you miss an episode of the show, you can always go back to our website, kvnutalk.com, and click on the demand category where you can access prior shows and see all the archives of the Garden Guide along with other programming here on KVNU. So, Mark, enjoy the rest of the weekend, and we'll see you again next week.
Thank you so much, Will, and we'll be back next week with another edition of the Garden Guide.
If you want to connect with your kid and you need help, call the Girls and Boys Town National Hotline, 1-800-448-3000.
News at the top and bottom of the hour. News Talk KVNU, Logan, 610 AM at 102.1 FM. Proud to be locally owned and operated by the Cash